Hey everybody, welcome to the very first video review on this channel. I have done movie reviews in the past and I kind of stopped because moving and school and everything else like that. So I kind of wanted to pick it up again and I thought a good movie to start with would be Joker. I'm a big comic book movie fan, so this is right up my alley. Going in, I knew it was going to be relatively dark, darker than probably most of what we've seen, and it definitely delivered on that. And there were some parts where I thought it was a bit too much for me personally, but overall, I would say it's a pretty good movie. So typically how I structure these videos, I'll do like a pros, a cons, and then I'll give you my overall impressions, and then I'll give a final score out of 10. So let's jump into the pros. The very first thing right off the bat is gotta be Joaquin Phoenix's performance as Arthur and Joker. These characters are very difficult to play well, in my opinion, and they are different subtly, but there's definitely a difference, and you can see that shift as the movie progresses. Through the plot and everything, you really can see the differences between how he is as Joker and how he is as Arthur. And I think that Joaquin Phoenix definitely blew my expectations completely out of the water. I was not convinced that he would do the part justice, but I was proven wrong, and happily proven wrong. He did an absolutely fantastic job. Will I consider him up to Heath Ledger? I don't know, but it was incredibly good. I would not be surprised if there was Oscar contentions for his performance. Yeah, I was very, very pleased with Phoenix's performance. Another thing that I really liked about this movie was the antagonist in it was relatively unique. There wasn't a specific person, really, that could be pinned as the antagonist. The closest you could get is Thomas Wayne. But even then, it really seemed like it was more about the naturalistic environment than one specific person, which is unique because most of the time in comic book movies, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, and it's pretty clear cut which one of those, which characters fills one of those roles. And this one, obviously, the protagonist was Arthur and his journey to Joker, but I don't think it was as clear cut in terms of the antagonist role in this film. Like I said, Thomas Wayne, probably the closest you can get, but I think overall it was more the environment and society in general for him than just Bruce. Or I'm sorry, not Bruce, Thomas. Another thing I really, really enjoyed was the usage of the stairs as a metaphor for Arthur's journey to Joker. We visited these stairs multiple times. Each time he went up them, portrayed a different mindset, a different place that the character was in. At the beginning of the film, he was going up the stairs. He was slouched, head down, just defeated and everything. And as the movie progressed, we saw that change basically with every time he went up the stairs until at the end where he's going down the stairs as Joker. And just how it changed with that, and I thought that was just a great use of the environment to propel him forward in his character development for his journey. Another thing that was great was the very beginning scene. Was great for setting the tone for the entire film. Beginning scene, we just see him in the makeup chair at his job, and he was, had his makeup on. He was practicing his smile basically and trying to get him to smile because he was going to go out and twirl a sign and everything like that. So it was a really haunting first scene to go into the movie with. It just set the tone beautifully for how the movie progressed. The music was also fantastic. Usually you don't really notice the music, and if you do, it's usually because it doesn't fit, at least in my experience. In this, I noticed the music, but not because it didn't fit, but because it fits so well. Music is arguably one of the things that makes a movie and makes a scene what it is. And in this, there was absolutely no question that the music elevated and propelled the story forward. It gave you the tone of the film. It gave you the emotions of the different scenes that were going on. It was just incredible. And as a music person, it's always great to see. I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely thought that there wasn't anything out of place, that everything really fit well together. Character development wise, this is a big thing for me personally, because I like stories that where you can see the characters develop in a clear way, and you could really see that here. And a vessel that they used with that was the hallucinations with Arthur's neighbor. It was pretty easy to tell, like, right away, that after the original meeting in the elevator, that all the interactions after that were hallucinations from him. So that part was a little disappointing because of just how obvious it was, but it was cool to see how they used that to propel his character forward, and how the realization that these were delusions for him. It was just like another moment for a psychotic break. Another good thing that they did in terms of character development was their representation of Arthur's inability to perceive comedy from the socially acceptable point of view. I mean, you'd see him throughout the movie. He would just be a little off. He went to a comedy show and everybody would laugh, and then he would laugh completely after. He would tell a joke and he would look around to see if people were laughing, stuff like that. Stuff that that we would consider just socially awkward, cringy, somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing too much. And it plays a part later towards the end of the film when he's talking on the talk show about how comedy is subjective, and how this becomes kind of like his crescendo and his motivation. So it was cool to see just the little bits of his socially awkward tendencies be connected to his overall motivation at the end of the film. I thought that was a great use. A great vessel to use that with. The last thing I really enjoyed about this film was the homages to the different comic book storylines. There were a couple in there. There were some that were subtle, like the ending scene where he goes on to the talk show host is a homage to the Dark Knight Returns storyline. There's some nuances in there, but basically, like when he gave the woman that was on the show a kiss in the Dark Knight Returns, something similar happens, and except that's how he kills that person, because he has poison laced like a plastic thing over his lips, similar to what we've seen Poison Ivy do. And just similar things like that. There was also another homage to the storyline where Joker was actually responsible for killing both Thomas and Martha, which I thought was pretty cool. And I thought that's actually where they were going with that, which if implicitly it is what happened. I mean, Joker was responsible for the revolution and everything and all the violence that popped up, but it wasn't him that pulled the trigger, so it was a nice homage to it. This wasn't in the film, but something I wouldn't mind seeing explored is there was actually a storyline where instead of Martha and Thomas getting killed in the alleyway, Bruce is the one who got killed, and Thomas becomes what we know as Batman, and Martha becomes Joker. I think it would be a very interesting storyline to pursue, because they both dealt with it in different ways, and it would definitely bring another interesting dynamic to the relationship between Joker and Batman if for this iteration they used to be married. So just a little tidbit there, not in the film, but something I think would be cool. So that's pretty much it for the pros. Now, I don't think any movie is perfect. I think even if there's a lot of mistakes in a film, sometimes they can be small and not really impact my overall score. So I mean, obviously this is subjective for the most part. I think there's objective measures that you can measure a film by, but for the most part it's subjective, so take these with a grain of salt. And I'd love to know what you think of the pros and cons of the film. from your perspective, what you think of the things that I've presented here. Let me know down in the comments below. So the first thing that I'll say that I wasn't the biggest fan of was pacing. The movie felt really slow, and at times it really felt like they were using all these different events that are happening in Arthur's life, these psychotic breaks and everything, as a way to fill up time. The movie was a little over 2 hours long, and there were certain points where it just dragged for me personally. The amount of teetering that he did between what we know as Arthur and then what he eventually becomes as Joker, I think there was just too much time spent on it. There could have been one or two less events that happened that caused him to do the break, and to focus that time on something else, on his journey to being Joker, or maybe when he becomes Joker in his own mind, spending time on that more than where they did spend it. I just wasn't the biggest fan of the pacing and just how much they teetered between that. Another thing was the suffocating his mom in the hospital bed. When he went to suffocate her, the oxygen tube was still in her nose. Now, to be fair, after he was done, you could see that the oxygen tube was out of her nose, but there wasn't a time where you saw him take it out. So I guess it's implicit, but at the same time, it's pretty obvious that it's still in there. So it's a little weird that you can smother somebody who's breathing through an oxygen hose. Also, if she flatlined, the machine she was hooked up to would have made a noise, would have done a long beep. So, and that didn't really happen, and you didn't see him disconnected or anything like that, because you could still hear the beeping as the scene was progressing. So it's a minor thing, but for trying to portray a character, a switch in perspective, a switch in mindset, the little things count like that. And it was just something that I noticed that kind of took me out of that scene. I was just sitting there like, wait a minute, this is still there. Why isn't the machine going off? Stuff like that. Also, and this one I will 100% say is definitely more subjective than anything else, other of my other criticisms. But I felt like there was a complete motivational disconnect from this Joker and the Joker that we know from other stories. Now, I understand this is completely separate from the other Joker films. The films that Joker has been in, it's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not supposed to be part of any iteration of the DC universe. Not with the Batman vs. Superman or from the Suicide Squad, like nothing like that. This isn't supposed to be connected at all. So I understand that there's liberties that will be taken with how the character thinks and, stuff like that. But Joker is supposed to be this character that just wants to watch the world burn. He wants to create chaos. It doesn't matter with who. He just wants to create chaos. And in this movie, his motivation was not creating chaos. It was about helping the people that he felt were oppressed, that were under scrutiny. It was all about killing the rich people because they mistreated the poor people. And to me, that is such a disconnect between the Joker that I know and that the majority of the DC Universe fans know, to this one. And maybe that was on purpose. Maybe they were trying to change the motivation. This was a very political movie. It was very politically motivated, a lot of political messages in it. And if that was the goal, then perhaps that's why they changed it. But to me, it just felt like this isn't really... The motivation for this Joker is not the same for the Joker that has been consistent with the rest of the DC universe. And if that was the case, I mean, great, cool. For me personally, it didn't really work. And the last thing that I really didn't like about the film is that there's this implicit statement that Joker is the good guy, and then Bruce becoming Batman will be the bad guy. A lot of what comic book movies suffer from, and I would argue a lot of films suffer from, is from a villain that is relatable. A lot of the villains that you'll see in like a Marvel film or even in a DC film, these villains are forgettable. There's not much to them. There's not much depth. But when we get a villain with depth, that you can relate to. The villain is obviously better. For example, Thanos was a great villain in Infinity War because the rationale behind what he was doing you could relate to on a certain level. Loki was the same way. From the Marvel universe, you could relate to him. And these were great villains. Even the villain from Black Panther was the same way. I'm spacing his name right now. But with this, they were trying to do that. They were trying to get you to relate to Joker. They were trying to get you to relate to Arthur and why Arthur became Joker, his motivations behind everything, how they portrayed the rich people, how the poor people were living. They just made it seem like this uprising was against the people who were directly responsible for how these people lived, and therefore everything that Joker represents is good, and everything that the Waynes represent is evil. And I'm not a big fan of that. I understand that this is from his perspective, so he's going to be the good guy in his own story, and then the Waynes are the bad guys in the story because he believes they're responsible for everything that's happened to him. But as an overall overarching message, it just plays into how overtly political this movie was. I just wasn't a big fan of that. But overall, I thought the movie was pretty good. The character development was great from Arthur to Joker. The performance from Joaquin Phoenix from Arthur to Joker was absolutely incredible. It was accompanied by incredibly good music. They used very unique methods to develop his character, like the hallucinations with the neighbor, the stairs going to his place, to his apartment with his mom. And basically having the antagonist not necessarily just around a certain person, but around society itself. I thought that was a really good way to portray this character's transformation. Pacing was a little off for me. There was a couple flubs in my opinion with how some of the scenes work, like with the mom and everything like that. It was a little bit too political for my taste. However, despite all that, I still think it was a good movie. It's very dark. It was a little too dark for me. But again, I knew going in that's what it would be. It was just definitely a lot more than I expected. For a score, I would definitely say it's a 7 out of 10. I would recommend, if you enjoy Joker and you like this kind of storytelling, and you kind of like a unique way of representing a character's story arc, I would definitely recommend this film. Thank you guys for watching my first review on this channel. I do apologize. I don't have like any video editing software or any skills with any of it, so this is kind of just going to be just raw for now. I do want to continue to do these as movies that are interesting come out. If there's any movies you guys would like me to look at or you have an opinion on, please let me know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the review and liked the video, obviously, as well. I would be greatly appreciative. But until next time, have a good evening, and I'll see you all later.